Hey everyone, my name is Chelsea. Welcome to Little Mountain Ranch. Welcome to my kitchen. I'm happy to have you here with me today. Today we are going to spend some time in the kitchen and do quite a few different things actually. We are going to make a cake out of one of my vintage cookbooks. This cookbook is called the Green and Gold Cookbook. It is a vintage cookbook from Australia. I'll chat more about that in a minute. We're going to make a soup using a whole bunch of freeze-dried ingredients from my pantry that I need to get used up, along with some canned food. And this is going to be a cream of, and I've decided to throw a bunch of things in here, a cream of potato, cauliflower, and leek soup, also with some onions and some garlic from my canned French onion soup. So should be interesting. We'll see how it turns out. We are also going to make some yogurt and top off my never-ending kombucha, which is over there on the counter. And of course, once we're done in the kitchen, we are going to head outside and go down to the greenhouse. This time of year is a little bit tricky here on my channel because if you've been here for a while, you know that my channel is very seasonal. We live on a farm, I share my life, and farm life is very seasonal. So in the winter time, we usually spend a lot of time in the kitchen. We live in the north, there's lots of snow and it's very cold outside. So we don't spend a lot of time outdoors. A lot of the time here together is spent in the kitchen, making all kinds of different food. And then in the springtime, we start to transition more into some outdoor gardening activities, outdoor farming activities, sometimes some projects that we have going on here. And throughout the summer, we spend a lot of time together out in the garden, growing food and then preserving food. The autumn is spent primarily doing all kinds of preservation projects. And then we move back into the winter where we're cooking together a lot in the kitchen. And that is wonderful. And I've really enjoyed sharing content here on my channel like that because it is just in the rhythms of my actual life. However, the algorithm has a little bit of a difficult time figuring out where to place me. Am I a cooking channel? Am I a canning channel? Am I a gardening channel? I'm all of those kinds of things, but the algorithm does have a bit of a difficult time figuring that out, especially during the transition out of winter into the spring and summer months. So I am trying to help the algorithm figure that out a little bit by putting my cooking content at the very beginning of my videos and then moving to my outdoor content towards the end of the videos. And then of course, as we move into spring and summer, we'll spend more and more time outside in the garden together. I cook all year long, so obviously I'm sharing recipes all year long, but it definitely does shift more into gardening content as we move into the summer. I like to share those things with you guys sometimes just to keep you kind of updated on the behind the scenes and why I'm doing certain things the way that I'm doing it on my channel. One of the other things that I do in the spring when my channel is transitioning from the cooking content into more of the gardening content is I do share a little bit more sponsored content on my channel, which I know some people don't like, and I get it because we're inundated with advertising all the time. However, it is necessary for those of us where YouTube is actually the way that we support our families to bring in a little bit more income during the low periods of time on our channel. So I just wanted to explain that just because I feel honestly a little bit awkward when I do sponsored content, but it is also a part of my job. And I'm always incredibly honored that there's so many amazing companies that want to work with me. So I just kind of wanted to explain that a little bit to give you a little bit of kind of behind the scenes of how it works here on YouTube. Enough about that though. Let's get into making this recipe. So we're making a recipe that's called Canadian War Cake, which I think is interesting because this is out of an Australian cookbook. So this cookbook was sent to me by Jeanette from Australia. Thank you so much, Jeanette. It says, the Green and Gold Cookbook was first published in 1923 and was compiled as a fundraising initiative by King's College, an all-boys school in Adelaide, South Australia. The recipes in the book were contributed by the matrons of Adelaide Society. This book has 40 editions published, and this one, the 28th edition, was published in 1951. And as you can see, it has been well used. Those are my favorite kinds. I hope you find this book interesting, and I can't wait to see which recipes you decide to cook from it. So we decided to start with the war cake. It was actually my daughter who was flipping through this cookbook and wanted me to try this. And one of the reasons why I like recipes that were written around wartime is because they tend to be really, really frugal. And I think during these times, these inflationary times that we're currently living in, where food is just getting increasingly more and more expensive, these kinds of recipes can actually really help with our bottom line on our budgets. So the Canadian War Cake actually says eggless, butterless, and milkless. So this one is going to be a thrifty recipe that we're going to put together. I think it's going to taste a little bit like a gingerbread kind of flavor because of the ingredients that it has in it. So let's get into that right away. So we're gonna do 2 cups of brown sugar. Just slightly packed brown sugar. So we have a teaspoon of salt, a teaspoon of ginger, and a teaspoon of cloves. And we're gonna dump that right in there. This recipe calls for 1 packet of raisins. I'm not sure how much that is, but for the amount of the other ingredients, I'm guessing it's somewhere around a 1/2 cup or so. So we're gonna add a 1/2 cup of raisins, 2 cups of hot water. So we want to boil these all together for 5 minutes until it starts to bubble a little bit. Over here, I'm just pasteurizing some milk so that I can make some yogurt. We prefer pasteurized milk for our yogurt just because it makes a thicker yogurt. And we're going to bring this up to, I think it's 164. I always just kind of eyeball it honestly and hold it that temperature for a couple of minutes and then let it cool down to around 86 or so degrees Fahrenheit, and then we'll add our yogurt to it. We don't want to add our yogurt to it when it is hot though, because that will kill all the good bacteria that's in our yogurt. We're just about there, so I'm actually going to turn the heat off now. So we just keep, this is what we call our never-ending kombucha. As soon as it gets about half full like it is now, we top it off with a fresh gallon of it, and then it only takes about 3 days to ferment at that point, and then we can start drinking it again. So it's a much faster way to make kombucha than making a fresh batch all the time. So one of the things that I try to do in the morning when I come into the kitchen is to take a mental note of, and sometimes I'll even jot it down if there's lots of things to do, but all the different things that kind of need to be taken care of. So if it's a bread making day, I'll note that. If I need to add some more kombucha to my kombucha, I'll add that. Making yogurt and things like that. So this morning it was the kombucha. Actually, I could probably make some bread too, actually, now that I think of it. It was the kombucha, the yogurt, and then of course I wanted to make sure that I got dinner done in the morning, so figuring out what I was gonna do with that. Then what I do is I kind of figure out where there are going to be some waiting times in some of the recipes that I'm doing. So for instance, this needs to boil for 5 minutes. So during that 5-minute period, I have time to come over here and make my sweet tea for my kombucha. And this really does help me to be more efficient with my time. It's definitely easier now to be efficient in this way than it was when I had younger children. I'm just in a very different stage of life now, but I cannot tell you how much stress it has relieved for me to learn how to be efficient like this in the kitchen, where I utilize every second that I spend here as efficiently as possible. So what I've done here is I've put 6 tea bags in here and 1 cup of sugar. And now I'm just going to add some hot water, and I'm gonna have to boil a little tiny bit more. This has now been bubbling for 5 minutes, so we're gonna turn the heat off. This mixture actually has to cool now, so I'm just gonna put it outside on the deck so it can cool faster. And now our milk also has to cool. So I'm going to encourage this to cool faster by putting it in a sink of cold water. And then I'm going to add a couple of tablespoons of yogurt into each of my quart jars. I think I'm actually only gonna need 5 for this one. So we're going to add our yogurt in here, and then I can just set that aside for when our milk is cooled, and then add it straight in, and it'll be ready to go. And now our kettle is done, and we can add our hot water. With these big gallon jars, I find if I just add a little bit of the hot water in the bottom, let the jar warm up a bit for a minute, then I can just pour my boiling water right in without having the jar crack. So now we'll set that aside because that also has to cool. Shut our water off here. And now, while all of these things are cooling, we are going to get our soup put together. The only thing we really have to do to prep for this soup is to chop up some potatoes, because the rest of it is all basically ready to go into the pot. It's my favorite type of recipe, one that doesn't require too much pre-chopping. So I could peel these potatoes, but just scrubbed them up because it's faster, and I really want to get outside because it is beautiful outside today. So we're going to be as efficient as we can with this. So we're just going bite-sized pieces here. These are the very last of my potatoes. They're not sprouting or anything yet in the root cellar, but as you can see, they are little tiny ones. I'm going to be planting potatoes outside here very soon. Just quite exciting. I bought, I don't know, probably 8 new varieties of seed potatoes this year from my favorite place to order seed potatoes, and that is Eagle Creek Seed Potatoes in Alberta. I've been ordering seed potatoes from them for, I don't even know how long now, probably 10 years at least. And they have amazing seed potatoes. They're usually sold out this time of year. I think they probably have a few varieties left, but it's LMR 10 for a 10% discount if you do want to order from them and you are in Canada. When fall comes around and I'm doing my big order, I usually try to do the order in kind of November, late November at the latest. But when I get to that point, I will share that with you again, because they do have some really fun varieties. I think I've experimented with just about every variety that they sell because they're all fun, and I have a couple of favorites now, but I'll share all that with you when we're actually at the point of planting. So I was really happy with last year because last year's potatoes got in way late and most of them were a lot smaller than we're used to getting, but we're still into May now, yay, and have potatoes. Not a lot, we don't have a lot left, but enough to get us through probably another month at least anyway. So I want to make a pretty big batch. Oh, I've got a little bit of green on that one. So that one was exposed to a little bit to too much sun. So we're gonna chop that piece off because that will give us a tummy ache. What was I saying? Oh yes, that we are going to make a really large batch of soup today because we are hitting our really busy time of year here on the farm. And I try to make as big of batches as I possibly can so that we can have leftovers for the next day's lunch or dinner, whatever the case may be. Right now, we have 6 teenagers in the house, if you can imagine, and they eat so much. I've noticed a major increase in the amount that they're eating in the last, I don't know, 2 months or so. So oftentimes I think I've made enough to be able to have leftovers, but by the end of the meal, every single little crumb is gone. You can probably hear the chicks over there. We ended up with 4 chicks from those eggs that we saved from a mama who had abandoned her nest right at the very end of the eggs gestation period. And yeah, 4 of them hatched. So we have 4 cute little chicks over there by the window. I'll show you them in just a second. I'm actually tempted to put some eggs in the incubator this year. Oftentimes we let our mamas, our chickens hatch out their own babies, which I love to do because there's just it's less work for us to do it that way. But I really do need some new chickens for next year because this year we're not getting nearly enough eggs. We probably have maybe 20 hens or so, which in order to be able to store up enough eggs to last over the season when they're not laying in the wintertime, which is usually here is November, December, and January, and then they start laying kind of end of January, beginning of February again when the days start getting a bit longer. When we eat eggs, like if we're gonna have scrambled eggs or anything like that, or quiches, we'll eat a couple dozen eggs in one meal easy. So I'm kind of thinking maybe we'll hatch out some more just to guarantee that we're going to get some, because it's not a guarantee that I'm going to have mamas hatch out or that they're going to be successful, as this last hatch was an example of. So I feel like this amount of potatoes that I chopped here, let me show you how many I ended up chopping, is going to be enough. This recipe that we're going to do today is more of an inspiration for you recipe. It isn't so much a get a pen and paper and write it down recipe, because I'm just kind of winging it, which honestly is the way that I cook. I would say probably 90% of the time. I don't usually use a lot of recipes. I would say outside of baking, I do use recipes for baking, but for most of our dinners, I don't. But the basic principles of this, as far as a cream soup go, will work for lots of different cream soups. We're gonna throw in around a 1/4 cup of butter into the bottom of our pot here, and we're gonna turn that up to medium. So I'm going to start by making a roux for this cream soup. If I was going to be frying onions and garlic and things like that into the bottom, I would actually fry the onions and garlic in my butter and then add my flour to that. But because I have all my onions and garlic already in this French onion soup over here, I'm just going to make the simple roux first. So I'm going to use a 1/4 cup of butter and a couple of tablespoons, probably 3 or 4 tablespoons of flour to make my roux. And we're going to add our flour. Let that cook a little bit more. And into this, we're going to add our French onion soup. There, so now we have a nice creamy base. We're gonna put in a couple more jars of stock. We're gonna put our potatoes in there. We are going to fill this about halfway up with water now. And then into this, we are going to add a whole bunch of leeks. And these are freeze-dried leeks from last summer. And then we're going to add a whole bunch of freeze-dried cauliflower. We're going to add some freeze-dried parsley to this. And a little bit of pepper. I'm not going to add any salt because I usually add salt to my stocks. So I'll wait and taste it before I decide to add any other seasonings at all. So I am going to be adding some cream to this soup as well. So what I'm going to do at this point is let this cook until all the vegetables have softened. And then I'll decide as far as how much cream I'm going to add, or if I'm going to add any more soup stock, or if I'm going to add any more cauliflower. We'll just have to wait and see. Okay, we have our cooled sugar mix there. So now we need 1 teaspoon of baking soda dissolved in 1 tablespoon of hot water and 3 cups of flour. And there we go. I'm going to put some parchment paper in here. Okay, so we're baking this for around an hour at 375. So while that's baking, we'll add our yogurt, or our milk into our yogurt rather. So I'm just giving these a stir, and then they're going to go into my dehydrator. I have an Excalibur dehydrator that has a yogurt setting, which is around 110 degrees Fahrenheit is where we like to make our yogurt at, and then they'll stay in there for 24 hours, and then we will bring them out and use them. Sometimes we strain them if we're wanting to go for more of a thick, really thick yogurt, but in general our yogurt's pretty thick. You can add a tablespoon or 2 of powdered milk to your yogurt to thicken it up even more if you like. Okay, these are going down to the dehydrator. And now we're going to scoop out our tea bags from here. And then we'll top this off with some cold water just to cool it all down before we add it into our kombucha. And I try to add it in slowly enough that the SCOBY doesn't get too disrupted or flipped over. But even if it does sink down a little bit or fold over a little bit, it'll come back up and cover the top. Now our kombucha is all fed. So here's our little baby chicks. Aren't they cute? Cutie pies. We're gonna get the kitchen all cleaned up here, and then we'll head outside to the greenhouse and spend a little bit of time out there while our cake is cooking. I come in here and I just feel such a sense of peace, and just the smell of it and the feel of the humidity in the air and the sight of all these beautiful plants everywhere. so nice. But I want to show you what I have gotten up to since we were in here together last. I have topped a lot of my zinnias. I have also topped, but still need to top more, zinnia and also marigolds as well. So I'm going to show you why I top, where I top and why I top. One sec. The reason that I am topping my cosmos, often I'll just throw cosmos seeds out into the garden and I just let them kind of go for it. But because I started these early, because I was hoping to get some early blooms this year, they are growing very fast. I could have waited a little bit longer before I started them, so they're growing very fast. So that's one reason, is just to kind of slow them down a little bit. But the other reason is I would like to have a nice bushy plant with lots of blooms on it. And you can encourage that by topping. So I'll usually top once there's 3 sets of leaves. So here's 1 set, 2 set, and 3 sets. And then I top it, as you can see here, right just above the 3rd set of leaves. And then this is a really good example because you can actually see it starting already. So at the crook of the leaves, right here where the leaves attach to the stem, there is a new branch coming out. Can you see that? So by cutting it off, these branches will come out on Cosmos anyway, but they won't be as full, as bushy, or do it as quickly if you don't top the plant like this. This is going to bush out nice and fast, but also it's not going to grow up and start falling over here in my greenhouse. This will slow it down enough that by the time I put it out into the garden in about 3 to 4 weeks from now, it is going to be a nice little bushy plant already. So that is the reason that I top those. So with these zinnia, I'm actually going to do it at the 2nd leaf, just because these are in soil blocks and I don't want to pot them up because zinnia do not like root disturbance at all. So I'm going to already give them some of that when I actually put them out into the garden. I haven't done them in soil blocks before and I kind of feel like I'm going to regret it, because when I take these soil blocks out, I'm going to have to pull them apart, pull the roots apart, which is going to shock those roots quite a bit, I think. The first couple of times you top any type of vegetable or fruit, it's going to not be a fun thing and it's going to make you feel a little bit nervous. But once you've done it once and you kind of have trust in the process that it's going to be okay and that your plants are going to actually bush out and they're going to look lovely, then it's not such a bad thing there. I think that's probably good. So I'm going to show you some of the plants I've already done this to. Okay, so this is a snapdragon. Snapdragons are another one that bush out nicely if you cut them off, but you can see here, so this is where I topped this plant right here, and then you can see the nice branches that are coming up there, and it's going to make a nice bushy plant. And this is an even more extreme case. Look at all of that growth that's happening around the bottom of these ones. So peppers would be the one exception when it comes to topping for me personally. I don't top my peppers, whereas a lot of farmers and gardeners in more southern climates than us with a longer growing season do top them for the exact same reason that I just shared with you that I was topping my flowers. So these annual flowers that I'm growing are very fast growing, and I actually will get out of them more flowers, more blooms, but I'm not looking to actually develop fruit from those flowers. I am, however, definitely looking to produce fruit off my pepper plants, and I have found that when I top them, we don't have a long enough season for all of those branches to actually produce flowers and then to produce fruit and ripen that fruit. So for me, topping my plants is actually a little bit counterproductive, or my pepper plants, because they put all this energy into producing all of this foliage and all of these new flowers rather, that they don't have a hope of having enough time to actually ripen. So peppers are one that I don't do topping to, that I know a lot of other people do. Now over here we have several more plants that we have started over here. So all of these, and up over here are all popcorn. So I had one year that I successfully grew enough corn to actually can a little bit. I think we were able to can around 6 or 7 quarts of corn. But to get those 6 or 7 quarts of corn, it was a ton of work, just because of the number, or of the amount of babying that my corn seedlings need. So number one, I have to start them indoors, as you can see here. Corn are another plant that don't really love to be transplanted. very much, but this is the only way that I actually can get mature corn where we live. And that particular summer that I had a successful corn harvest was a very hot and long summer for us. So I think that that probably had more to do with it than anything else. That being said, I do love growing corn, and I have this dream of being able to grow rainbow popcorn. I just really want to be successful doing this. So I found a popcorn that's called, I think it's called Northern Lights popcorn, that is a shorter season variety. And then there's a couple of other varieties here that have been sent to me by subscribers over the years that are short season ones. So I thought, what the heck, we'll just go for it. I'll just put them in a little corner and hopefully we'll have a nice hot summer again this year and I'll get some popcorn. I did some pink popcorn, the Northern Lights, one that's called Bodacious, and I can't remember what the fourth one was called. But anyway, so we have that here. We also have, what else do we have? I planted a couple of loofahs, which I did plant one year. I ended up with, I think, 3 that I was actually able to dry and turn into sponge. These were grown, of course, in my high tunnel. There's no way they would grow outside, but I had some seed left over that I had actually harvested from my own loofah. So I figured, what the heck, may as well. So I started 2 of those. I also started some more sunflower seeds, which were sent to me by a subscriber. And I had mentioned on a video that I had wanted some red sunflowers. And so she sent me some seeds. So thank you so much for that. Those are planted up over here. And then the pickling cucumbers I shared with you last time, that we got those all started as well. So right now at this point, I went through my seeds yesterday and we are now officially done starting seeds in the greenhouse. That being said, I probably will do a couple more trays of lettuce because I like to have my lettuce staggered. So I usually plant some every week throughout the growing season. And also I have started doing a little bit of hardening off with some things. I like to try to start hardening off as early as possible, just so that way by the time I'm actually ready to put things in the garden, I don't have a long hardening off process. So outside, we have our baby strawberries, we have some pansies here, we have some more strawberries, and this one was called pincushion flower, and some more strawberries over here. And I'm gonna start bringing out my onions and some of my brassicas, my early cabbages that I have, my other early cabbages, my kale, things like that. I'll start putting those out in the daytime because they can go out a little bit earlier as long as they have a bit of protection. So one of the things about crops that are considered cool crops, like most of the brassicas, the cabbages, and the cauliflowers and the broccoli, is that even they do not like cold nighttime temperatures. So anything that's kind of below 10 degrees Celsius, they will end up getting stressed under temperatures like that. So the thing with broccoli, and I think broccoli is particularly prone to this, is it will do something called forming a button head. So a button head is a little tiny head of broccoli that's about yay big when it is under stress early in the season. So this can be from heat stress, but it can also be from nighttime cold temperatures, so cold stress. So I do tend to err on the side of caution with my broccoli especially, and wait until those nighttime temperatures are consistently above 10 degrees Celsius before I put them outside, because as you know, I like those nice, big, beautiful heads of broccoli, and those can only be done when the temperatures are relatively cool. It's not blazing hot outside in the summer, but the nighttime temperatures are warm enough that they don't get too stressed. Okay, my timer is just about to go off for our cake, so we'll head back up to the house. I think I'm gonna leave the door open because it is very hot in there. Perfect timing. Our cake is done. Look at how beautiful that looks. How lovely. Let's pop it out. That is a really beautiful little cake. We'll cut into that in a minute, but this soup is absolutely delicious. I don't have to add anything to it at all, but I do think though that to thicken it up a little bit more, and also just because I have a lot and I need to use it up, I'm gonna add some more of our freeze-dried cauliflower and try not to add our oxygen absorbers in there too. I've done that before. This soup is going to be delish anyway, so I'm going to use the immersion blender and just blend this up a little bit, not very much, because I still want some of those chunks in there. So when I'm going to make a cream soup that I actually want to be fully creamy, I will run it through my Vitamix because I just like it really smooth. So I do that with our tomato soup, I do that with our squash soup, but for a soup like this, it's not even necessary actually, but just to add a little creaminess to it, I am just gonna use my immersion blender. I think that is good enough. And then I'm also going to add just a little bit of cream to this as well. That looks just perfect. I'll show you when I have it all bowled up. Let's scoop some of this up. Oh my goodness, it smells so good. Look at that. Do you know what else would have been good in this soup? Is a little bit of corn too. That would have added a little sweetness to the savoriness. Bacon and corn would elevate it to a whole other level. Wow, that is very, 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 very dense. Okay, you guys try that cake and tell me what you think.
It is very dense.
It is very dense. Yeah, it is.
You can taste the seasoning in it.
The nutmeg?
Cloves.
Cloves. Yeah, cloves.
Is it very clovesy?
Yeah.
So there's not like cheers coming from the table, but what do you guys think? You like it?
I think it tastes okay.
You think it tastes okay? You like it? What do you think, honey?
I haven't tasted it.
Okay, give it a try and see what you think.
It's good, but it's like...
Too much, the cloves flavor is probably pretty overwhelming. I wanted to follow the recipe exactly before I did any modifications on it so you could see, but it's very clovesy. Yeah, so I think that it's pretty good. It's definitely strong. That clove flavor is very strong, and I'm actually not a huge fan of cloves, but like I was just telling the kids, I wanted to follow the recipe exactly for those measurements to see. But talk about easy cake to put together. And what do you think of the soup? So the soup needs salt, but like I said, I don't like to add salt to my soup because I already add it to the stock, and then that way everyone can just season their soup to the flavor they like. Do you like the flavor of it though? The soup? Yeah? Okay, good. Yeah, all the kids like the soup, so yay for that. I hope you enjoyed spending some time with me, everyone, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Bye.